First, I want to thank our first panels, Ibu Nurhaya and Pak Saubat, for giving their insights in regards to economy, the growth of Indonesia, and how that works with the business private sector, along with fintech and its incorporation within the government. At this moment, I just want to give a short introduction. I am happy today to introduce our keynote speaker. Welcome the Honorable Ibu Rosmalawati Chalid. She is the Consul General of the Republic of Indonesia, based in Chicago, Illinois, career diplomat in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, holding such offices such as the head of Bureau for Personnel, first female diplomat to serve in this position in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Her experience, as well as within the various sectors of government, will gain more insight in our discussions today in doing business with Indonesia. So without further ado, I welcome you, our keynote speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Adian. And good morning to all of you. I would like to speak about the bilateral economic relations between Indonesia and the US, because I look into the agenda and I noticed that two speakers will speak on doing business in Indonesia, so I prefer speaking on the bilateral economic relations between Indonesia and the US. But first, I would like to introduce our this one. Consulate General in Chicago. The consulate was established in 1983. That was, I think, almost 30 years, more than 30 years, 37 years. And it was just last week that the foreign minister officiated the new building of the consulate. So we moved to a new building. It's now owned we purchased the building early this year. And before, we have to move from one place to another. It's been 5 times, I think. Yes, we moved from one place to another because we had to rent places. And then the consulate covers 13 states here in the US, 12 states in the Midwest, and plus one that is Kentucky. And the mission is, I think, almost the same with all other consulates. We promote bilateral economic relations, and that means trade, investment, tourism. And then we also covers social and cultural relations between Indonesia for this consulate with the Midwest. And then, of course, one important function is also we provide services to consular services like visa and then passport, and also the protection of our nationals. And there are about, I think, 212,000 Indonesians, I think, residing in the Midwest area, 12,900 something plus. So it's almost 13,000 Indonesians residing in the Midwest area. And the composition is like 40%, almost 40% are permanent representatives, about 30% are students, and then about, I think about 10% are children born here in the US. And the rest, I think, is professionals and Indonesians who are working here in the Midwest area. Before I go further into the bilateral relations, I have this video about Indonesia and the United States.
Perhaps you know already what our Pancasila is. It gives us the 5 principles of our state.
Well, Mr. President, the American people are honored that as citizens of the world, we count as our close and trusted friends the people of Indonesia.
Leader of the world's third largest democracy. And we're very encouraged by that.
That we can make as a region towards greater security and prosperity for all of us.
Thank you.
Terima kasih.
Thank you.
What other nation on earth could produce Joko Widodo and Barack Obama as their leaders? Only in Indonesia and America is that possible.
Indonesians for decades have been building domestic and democratic institutions to become one of the fastest growing nations of the G20. Today, it is the third largest democracy on earth.
So next year will be 70th anniversary of bilateral relations between Indonesia and the United States. And from that short video, you can see that symbolically, actually we could give interpretation of how we perceive each other, you know. And I just would also like to give example that when there's the current administration, U.S. administration in office, and then Indonesia is the first country in ASEAN, that's the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, that was visited by the Vice President. So it's a symbol that, you know, despite all these political noises, actually the link between Indonesia and the U.S. will always be there, and we hope that it could be strengthened. And yes, this is just to give you an idea about the size of Indonesia. It's almost the same size with the United States, except that in Indonesia, consists of more water than land area. But again, as was mentioned before by previous panelists, that this geographical configuration of Indonesia is very important to understand about Indonesia, about its place, about its foreign policy, and I think where are we heading, and the fact that we are member of different organizations in the world is also the consideration is our geographical location and also interest, of course. And again, there are 3 time zones in Indonesia, and this will also affect business. Our bilateral cooperation was since 1949. Our independence was 1945, and the U.S. recognized our independence in 1949, along with the recognition by the Dutch government during that time in 1949. And then these are the milestones of our bilateral relations. There was a comprehensive partnerships agreement in 2010, and then strategic partnership in 2015. And we prefer actually, I think strategic partnerships means that there's a recognition on both sides about the strategic role of both countries for one another. And comprehensive partnership means that this partnership, this agreement covers many things under bilateral relations. I think almost all aspects. There's a multifaceted comprehensive relations. It's in the political, defense, and military relations, as the video showed, and then socio-cultural, including education here, which is very important, and then in economic, tourism, trade, and investment. I think I would like to give you an example as well that, you know, when at the end of the 60s or early 70s, when Indonesia was under the rule of President Suharto during that time, and that was the first time I think Indonesia was trying to open up to outsiders for foreign investments. There was a group of economists from Indonesia. There are alumni of the Berkeley, and there's a joke in Indonesia that, you know, these are the Berkeley's mafia, because they really the ones shaped the economy during that time. But they're really succeeding. But now we notice that, you know, we have so many economists now graduating from this area, from the Midwest. Now our finance minister graduated from the Urbana-Champaign, and also the minister for economic planning, and also from the Indiana University. Now so many alumni from this area are holds important position in government and also in business, and also their role in the alumni associations. With sometimes, you know, they're the one who actually move the people-to-people relations forward. On political cooperation, there's shared values of democracy and commitment to human rights. And we cooperate in counterterrorism issues, which is very important for both of us. And then we committed to religious freedom. There's a Department of State's initiative recently. The Department of State of the US organized the first summit on religious freedom. That was hosted by, I think, the Vice President, Mr. Mike Pence, and from Indonesia, our foreign minister attended that meeting. And then there's a shared understanding to progress in the region and the world. And again, I would refer to our geography again, how it is important Indonesia is in terms of trade, in terms of investment, in terms of security, because the investment of the US in the region in Southeast Asia is, I think, the largest, it's number 4 largest in the world. And then for trade, it's number 3 in the region. And we have military cooperation. But again, our constitution stated that we should have a free and active foreign policy which prohibits Indonesia to become a member of military pact. And so that's why we adopted the non-aligned movement instead. But that doesn't mean that there is no cooperation in terms of the military. In socio-cultural affairs, I don't know whether you are, you know that actually Indonesia was introduced in the Midwest area in the United States. That was during the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. During that time, the Dutch colonial power during that time brought a replica, a miniature of Javanese village to the exposition. And we understand from the historians that actually that was very successful. I was informed that the ticket to enter this Javanese village is $1 during that time, but then since it's very popular, it raised to $5 just for the ticket. So it just gives you idea that the way that Javanese village was presented in the exposition has attracted different attracted people in this area who attended that exposition. And then since then, there are more than 100 gamelan groups in the US. Gamelan is our traditional music, and there's a number, again, of prominent Midwest universities teaching Indonesian language and has gamelan programs. And there's a comprehensive trade, tourism, and investment promotion initiatives led by the Indonesian Consulate in Chicago, but actually not only by our consulate. We have 5 consulates in the United States, and then 1 embassy in DC, and then 1 Indonesian permanent mission accredited to the UN. So all these missions are very active in promoting trade, tourism, investment, and also other sectors. And we open for business sectors, entrepreneurs from Indonesia and the US. And then we also hold a business forum and mini expo for our consulate in Chicago. We regularly host this, organize the Remarkable Indonesia Fair. Next year will be in July, 13th of July, not June, in Navy Pier, Chicago. Mostly consisted of mini exhibition and then cultural performance and fashion show. And we add with the business forum. And this year it was focusing on tourism. Now on trade, the US is Indonesia's second largest trading partner, contributing 5.2% of Indonesia's total imports of $156 billion. These are our US main exports to Indonesia: soybean, cotton wet, animal feeding, propane, and then parts of airplanes. And soybean is basically from this area, the Midwest. So I think Indonesia is the second largest importer of US soybean after China. These are the volume of bilateral trade, and you can see that our trade, bilateral trade, is decreasing from 2013 to 2016, but then picking up again in 2017. This is a very interesting number, and we believe that the bilateral trade could be strengthened for the next year. And despite difficulties in economic situation, world economic situation. Yeah, this is the January to July 2018 trend in exports and imports. Indonesia's export increased by 16.45%. While import also rose 1.48%. We will look into the data if we compare it with investment. The US investment in Indonesia increased by 76%. So probably this also contributes to the number, the volume, the trade volume of the US trade with Indonesia. Based on the seaports, you can see that the port in Los Angeles and Honolulu are now gaining importance. So we understand that most of Indonesian goods come from that's the West Coast, right? The West Coast area. And in fact, the concentration of Indonesian populations are also in the West Coast area. Yeah. Our exports largely support the US industries as well. So this is really a mutually beneficial trade relations. These are the samples of our export products to the world. We produce high-tech product and also commodities, natural-based commodity products. This is just to give you examples of our export product. So if you come to Indonesia, surely you can purchase these goods cheaper than if you buy here. The handicrafts, tropical fruits. These are top US exports to Indonesia. Soybeans, petroleum gases, and then sugar and starch residues, cotton, and civilian aircraft. And it's only last year that Cessna opened up its maintenance facility in Indonesia because of the large purchase of the aircraft for training purposes. These are top US imports from Indonesia: oil, shrimp, and other crustaceans, shoes made of textile, rubber, sweaters, pullovers, kit or crocheted. And they are accounted for 22% of all inbound shipment. Again, as I mentioned, the trade relations is really mutually beneficial. Indonesia exports steel and aluminum to the US. I know you will ask whether we are affected by the policy of the US government here. But actually, our market share in the US market is only 0.29% for steel and about 0.9% for aluminum. And we have requested for exclusion from the policy. And we actually, 19 steel products are already excluded. And then also one aluminum product is also excluded. We're still requesting for 12 more steel products to be excluded from the tariff policy of the US government. So this is the work in progress. But we believe that the impact is not that significant because of the small market share. But maybe in other areas like maybe biofuel or other steel-related products that we produce could probably be affected. We're still studying on this, but again, the impact is not that significant yet. I hope it won't be significant. And then with the Midwest, our bilateral economic relations is also quite significant. The trade volume is $4.7 billion US dollars in 2017, and the deficit is for the US nationally and also with the Midwest. So we know we are one of the lists that was under the target of the US, to be that ask these countries, to address this trade deficit, and because of the deficit for the US, and talks are ongoing between Indonesia and the US how to address this trade deficit problem. And the last time was the visit of our trade minister coming to Washington, D.C. and discuss this with the USTR and also the Department of Trade. And I think we come to understand that actually our products to the US are not those that are that cause injury to the domestic industry here in the US. And also in terms of volume, actually the volume of our trade here in the US is still much lower compared to US main trading partners. There are three largest trade partners of Indonesia in the Midwest: Illinois, Ohio, and Indiana. And these are our main export product to the Midwest: apparel articles, electric machinery, and then apparel articles and accessories not kit, not knit, footwear gaiters, and then nuclear reactors, boilers, machinery. These are parts of nuclear reactors. And then our imports from the Midwest: oil seeds, food industry residues and waste, and then animal fat, and then parts of nuclear reactors, boilers, machinery, wood pulp, aircraft, spacecraft, and parts thereof, chemical products, optic, medical, surgical instruments, electric machinery, sound equipment, TV equipment. You know, we understand that there are I think many potentials from the Midwest, you know, to trade with Indonesia. Our health sector, for instance, we have this insurance system whereby all nationals, all Indonesian nationals should be included in the national insurance scheme. And we have these people lining up in hospital for healthcare services. And those are the people who before doesn't have access to basic healthcare services, and now they have these services. So there are premiums actually for people with the disposable income. They look for more healthcare premium. So there are actually potentials to invest in the healthcare sector, and that also comes with the health instruments that are needed by Indonesia. So I know that the Midwest area is very strong in healthcare industry. So we invite you to look into possibilities in Indonesia. This is bilateral trade volume between Indonesia and Indiana. So we only have data until 2017, but not on the 2018. But the number is quite impressive, you know. There's a quite significant number of increase from 2016 to 2017. Okay, we have this data then for 2018. This is the first semester. These are the Indonesian export products to Indiana. I'll try to be very quick. And then Indonesia's import products from Indiana. On investment, I think as mentioned before, that Indonesia was put on the rank 4 in terms of the most attractive investment destinations for 2017-2019 by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. And then again, in terms of ease of doing business ranking by the World Bank, Indonesia ranked number 72. I know that from 1 to 72 is quite a long way, but actually for Indonesia, this is a significant jump from ranking number 91, that was in 2014, I believe, to 72 in 2017. So that's only in several years, only 3 years, and then we jump 19 ranks, you know, and this is actually the result of the reform that was conducted by the government in many areas. Based on country of origin, the highest number of investment come from Singapore, followed by Japan, and then China, and then Hong Kong, and South Korea. The US investment in Indonesia is 455 projects, and the value is 6 million, cannot read, $646 million, and that's last year, and no, in 2018. And these are the sectors of US investment in Indonesia. If you look at this data, the number of projects, the largest number of projects probably in trade and reparation, and the smallest number is wood industry. But in terms of value, the highest number of value is in mining. And then the least is in, again, non-metallic mineral industry. You can see from this pie chart how mining is very dominant in US investment in Indonesia. And the second largest is hotel and restaurants, and then trade preparation. But in terms of value, again, mining is very high. And recently, I think the government has signed agreement with the Freeport for the 51% of divestment of Freeport share to the government of Indonesia. This has been quite a period of time that we negotiate with Freeport, I think. So we are happy that finally it was concluded last week, I believe. And then these are the direct investment realization in Indonesia. The majority are in transportation, warehouse, and telecommunication. This in mining, 16%, and then transportation, warehouse, and communication, 14.6%, and electricity, gas, and water supply, 11%, crops and plantation, 9%, housing, estate, and buildings. And then this the share by country of origin. Again, Singapore is 33%, Japan 14%, as mentioned by the slide before. What are the opportunities and challenges? I think the previous panelist has touched on the e-commerce, and the government would like Indonesia to be the largest digital economy in Asia by 2020, I forgot, 2020. So I hope our roadmap, is still on track. But I believe so because of again, Mr. Suai before mentioned about that. And then we have a strong macroeconomic outlook and favorable demographics, as mentioned before. This is to answer the question before about new centers for economic growth. The government created about 33 new centers of economic growth, and mostly are in outside of Java. So you can see by this the colors, the yellow, red, and blue. You can see that most of these new center growths are in outside Java. The green one is special economic zones, the red one is industrial zones, and the blue one is strategic national tourism zones. And on the strategic national tourism zones, if you heard about Bali, the government would like to create 10 new Balis in different areas in Indonesia. So these are to ensure the creation of not only economic growth for development. I mean, we have such an ambitious program for uplifting our the living of our population, and there's no other way for us to be able to compete internationally other than by creating new centers for economic growth. We cannot just rely on Java to feed all Indonesia. So these are the programs of the government. And connectivity, physical connectivity is also the priority. As you can see, that we have 17,000 islands, of which 6,000 are inhabited. And that creates actually challenges to logistic for economically. And again, so with that, the government is open for business in terms of investment particularly. These are the challenges that we feel that we face now. Indonesian products are less known in the US compared to products from Vietnam, Thailand, and the Philippines. I was wondering why, there's so relatively small numbers of Indonesian communities here in the US compared to Thais, Filipinos and Vietnamese. And then also with that, also business are not that as large as those communities, you know. So I came to the realization that actually there is not so much history between Indonesia and the US. And if you look into history, the U.S. presence in Southeast Asia basically are in the Vietnam, Thailand, the Philippines, because of the bilateral relationships that are, I think, closer compared to Indonesia and the U.S. And if I remember correctly, you have so many movies on Vietnam, the Vietnam War. And then there's also in the newspaper during that time, you know, the GIs, you know, went to Thailand, to Philippines for relaxation. And there's a military establishment in Vietnam and in the Philippines. So maybe that also contribute, you know, to the understanding of Americans on Indonesia. And then for the same products, Indonesian products has to compete in terms of pricing and quality from the products produced from countries such as China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, and other countries. Actually, our products is not a low quality products. Like my previous assignment was in Beijing. You know, I understand that China produces different kinds of products with different kinds of qualities, with different kinds of prices. So they practically they produce all kinds of products. There's always market for their products, whether domestically and also outside of China. So I can understand now in terms of scale, in terms of the volume of their trade, it's hard to beat China. And then, but we have also our niche products that are not, I think, maybe China could not produce or provide to the world. We have our, let's say, like our garments here, handicraft, and then because I think our craftsmanship is also very good. And we also have a big market domestically. So our businessmen prefer doing business internally, domestically in Indonesia rather than going abroad. It's 260 million people. And this is the challenge that I encounter when I invite Indonesian businessmen to come here. You know, okay, we provide a stage for you. Please come to Midwest, you know, to speak on this issue. And then mostly they think that, oh, okay, thank you, but we prefer concentrating at home, because for them also so many opportunities in Indonesia. And also, if you look regionally, we have this ASEAN free trade area, which offers 0% tariff to, I think, about 98% of products trading between the Southeast, the ASEAN nations. So they prefer concentrating on that part of the world. And now Indonesia is also encouraging for the establishment of the RCEP. That's a Regional Economic Comprehensive Partnership Agreement between the ASEAN, most of ASEAN, I think all ASEAN countries, and then Australia, New Zealand, China, Korea, and Japan. So that's quite a large area to be covered by our businessmen as well. So it's not surprising that they prefer, you know, concentrate more on that region. Not to mention that if you look at the number of tourists, U.S. tourists coming to Indonesia, the number is about 330,000 people. So it's quite low. So probably it's the distance between Indonesia and the U.S. that are not very maybe attractive also to them economically, perhaps, but also we have other competitors here. And then tariff and non-tariff barriers, such as the standards stipulated by the FDA for food packaging products. we understand that different countries have sets of rules and regulations that are different one another based on the the policy of the country themselves. So we believe that for FDA, for the food packaging products, this is something that we should increase in terms of quality. And then, but it's not exhaustive, because last year we had this, we participated in the I Heart Halal exhibition in Chicago, and surprisingly, I think the desire of the people in Chicago area and the surrounding area are very high for the halal products. And we noticed that our what's the noodles product, Indomie, is very popular, because and there is no competition from other noodle companies for the halal product in that area. So there are still potentials to be tapped. And then the increasing of the interest rate from the central bank causes the exchange rate of the Indonesian rupiah to US dollars very low. As of 27th of September 2018, $1 is equal to 14,900 rupiah, and that's, I think, the lowest so far. In 1998, when the rupiah plummeted, as you mentioned, like falling like a rock, it reached 16,000. But of course, now the situation is different between Indonesia in 1998 and Indonesia currently now. The impact of the low exchange rates is still manageable compared to the 1998. That, as Mr. Sued mentioned, that it brought Indonesia to its knees, but now Indonesia is still standing. And then U.S. tax cut policy is encouraging for U.S. investors to invest in the U.S. And then the intellectual property rights is always an issue for U.S. investment in Indonesia. Of course, we want to have transfer of technology from any companies investing in Indonesia. So this is like one important issue on this investment. And then how to boost investment? There are economic policy packages to create conducive investment climate and resolve supply side issues. And then relaxation in FDI, in foreign direct investment, to encourage more investment. And then acceleration of infrastructure development. Tax incentive is also provided. And then launching of online single submission to simplify investment. This is also to answer the previous question about if you want to go for investment in Indonesia, you just come to Jakarta. There's a one-stop service under in the office of the investment coordinating board. The one-stop service is an office for about representatives of about 22 ministries in Indonesia. So if you have your document completed as required, I think the issuance of licensing takes about 3 hours. But of course, that's a different procedure, a bit different for those who want to invest in energy sectors, energy and mining. I think there are more documents needed, but I think it won't be more than 3 days. So that's the practice that we have in Indonesia now to streamline the excessive bureaucracy, as mentioned before. These are the policy adopted by the Indonesian government in terms of investment and export. All of these policies are actually to simplify procedures, and then also to ensure that there's no corruption in granting licensing, and also giving incentives for investment and trade. These are the achievements of the government You know, now we cannot, we have to be transparent to our people, because again, this is a different generation in Indonesia. 60% are young people, and they want to know what's going on with government. So the government is very open about this, and if you look into the website of particularly the presidential office, I believe, there's some policy and there's a progress. These are the progress that has been done by the government. Yeah, there are milestones in central government as well as local government, and it covers information on how long roads have been constructed, bridges, and then how many classrooms are created, and then also medical service, and then tuition fee, and then there's so many things. Yeah, these are just to introduce you into the colors and tastes of Indonesia. And I would like to invite you to come to Trade Expo Indonesia that will be held in 24 to 28 October 2018 this year. And this is the largest trade exhibition in Indonesia, showcasing the best of Indonesian products. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wondered, and this is really for anyone, but what are the cultural similarities that make it easier for Americans to do business in Indonesia, and on the opposite end, the cultural differences that make it more challenging, and how can those be overcome?
Okay. In terms of culture, I think there's similarity here, that we are very diverse. As was mentioned before, that we have more than, I think, 300 ethnic groups. We have more than 700 languages, and the US is also very diverse, but it's a different kind of diversity, but still it's diverse. And we want to always to keep our diversity going, but in diversity we also have to we also want to have unity, and that's why, and also our motto is also very similar. It's diversity, unity in diversity. So it's the same with the US. But of course, if you ask for business culture, that's the different story. Indonesians are known for not very frank, in our dealings, in our way of communicating. I think I noticed that mostly, I think in some area in the Midwest are similar, very polite, except in certain area in Indonesia, they can be very frank. And in terms of business, the culture that I think that is important here is that you have to know, I think, who are in the business. You have to know who are the leader in that area. It's important that you maintain communication with them. That will be easier for you, because in Indonesia, of course, we have formal leaders, but they also have informal leaders who are very important. When the people are looking for them, sometimes for guidance, and this is particularly outside Java. Also in Java, in small cities, they're still very important. And then communication is sometimes, I think maybe Mr. Shueb should explain this, because he's a foreigner. I think he has this understanding on how to communicate with Indonesians. But for me, what should I say? We will commit, to our whatever contract that we have, And again, it's the communication that are needed. And then the understanding, you should put down the understanding, informal understanding into writing. Otherwise, if you don't have witnesses, and then you will have problem later on. So if you want to put something, agreement, some kind of agreement, you better put it in writing. So make sure that everything is there, so that we're not relying on certain amount of people knowing on that issue, which is sometimes very limited amount of people. And but in terms of when it comes to a policy, I think I will speak on the present government. The present government is really committed to making things easier for business in Indonesia, whether it's domestically or it's for foreign business coming to Indonesia. The commitment is really high, and people can see that, and people can feel that. And now again, there's a bit change in the culture, with the social media. Now more and more people are really frank about this because of the young people, and they don't really hesitate to speak their minds. And the way the government deal with this is also very, very transparent. The government open up a website. There's a link there on, I think the title is report. Report is lapor. A report. If there are complaints from anybody, you just put there on the report website, and then the government will address. And it's proven, because the government has a team that we don't know who usually check. They do fact check to different parts of Indonesia about this. And that's why sometimes the president is not in Jakarta. Well, his office is not in Jakarta anymore. It's in Bogor, in the suburb area. And sometimes he just go there, to visit, and he doesn't want also to rely to bureaucracy to tell him about problems, about anything. He has his own team, to fact check everything. So this kind of culture, business and political culture, is good, but for those who prefer the old way of doing things, of course, it's not good, because you mentioned about corruption. We still have corruption, but again, if you look at the numbers of people now going to jail, so our Corruption Eradication Commission is doing a good job in Indonesia. Last time that there was news that made headlines is that among the 45 members of parliaments in Malang City, 42 went to jail. So that's how serious the commission is in discharging its mandate. And people are now a bit afraid now of this commission. They're very careful. I am in the bureaucracy, and I can feel that since a long time ago. We are very afraid of this embezzlement, about this doing that things that are not according to regulations. There were times I think 5-10 years ago, when the spending of the realization of government spending is very low, because people in bureaucracy are very afraid, in spending their money, whether is this right, is this wrong, because we still confused. I think there's a confusion between the old practice and the new regulations, but now everything is now very clear. And the government, particularly the finance ministry, also disseminate information regularly about the rules and regulations pertaining to budget, to national budget. So culturally, there's a change takes place in Indonesia. We want to have this government that is accountable, transparent, and you can see from the public elected of public officials in Indonesia now, how the voters, I think people now voted for those who they think is clean, and then can deliver, and then true to their commitment. So that's what happens in Bandung, I think in West Java, and then I think we look into the next general election, how people will vote and what are their aspirations. Of course, I cannot say here my preference because I'm supposed to be neutral. But again, there's a change in culture. Political and business culture are now changing, and social media has an important role, in this regard.